This is why you should never buy a car cash. Now, I put this out on TikTok and it's went kind of crazy. It's had approaching 100,000 views. It's had almost 1,000 comments and it's quite controversial. So let me pre-frame a little bit of this here, because once you start to understand the power of leverage when it comes to money, this is how you can start making a lot of money, because you've got to do things very differently when it comes to building wealth. So the whole idea of not buying a car cash and leveraging car finance is all about that whole idea of leverage. So I'm going to break down the example I gave on that TikTok video that's went crazy, and I'm going to give a little bit more meaning to it, because on TikTok you've got a few minutes to maybe record something. So I want to go into it a little bit more, because this is where you start to look at how you can put your cash to better use. It's going to give you a greater return in order to make more money, to, build wealth and change your financial situation. So the example that I gave in the video was, if you were going to go and buy a car, let's say it's 30 grand, rather than going buying that car for 30 grand cash using your hard-earned money that you might have saved up, or that's your working income that you've been working to save that money to go and buy that. If you go and buy that car cash, then that's £30,000 of your own money that's just taken away because you've bought a car. Now, a car is an asset, however, it's also a liability, because it's got running costs, it's got maintenance, it's got ongoing, costs like your MOTs and your car insurance and all the other costs that comes with running a car, okay? And not only that, it's a depreciating asset too, because the more miles you put on that car, then that car is going to go down in value. Now, I had so many comments from people saying, well, buy classic cars. Well, people not buying classic cars, I get that. And if you buy a classic car for an investment, then great. But the challenge comes with that there as well, is that you cannot go and put miles on it. And then a few people jumped in and says, well, I've bought these old cars and I've done them up and, I still put more miles on and it's worth more. Yeah, the last few years we've had a very different marketplace due to supply and demand, through everything with the lockdowns and manufacturing of just certain chips. So let's take, for example, I have a Mercedes GLS. It's the family car. When we first got that car on finance, then we had that for 2 years. We put like 15,000 miles on it, and we got offered more than what we bought that car for in the first place. And the only reason being is because at that time, the production of the Mercedes chips, they couldn't get enough chips for their cars, which means that kind of drives up the value of used cars, right? So that's why, through a lot of things that's happened over the last few years, that's kind of given you this kind of false impression that cars are going up in value. It's simply a supply and demand. When I went into Rolls-Royce in Edinburgh to look for a Wraith, I was kind of interested. I wanted to see if they had anything on the forecourt. And they had only one car, and that one car had already been sold. Now, if you go into Rolls-Royce in Edinburgh today, right now in the early part of 2023, they've got a lot more cars, because that supply and demand issue is changing. So again, it's all relative, but I also understand that some cars potentially can go up in value, or some cars potentially, if you buy it for a collective item that you don't put any miles on it, it's going to be a worthwhile investment. But that's not the masses, okay? Also, and I see this in terms of the comments, and rightly so, is some people say, well, who's got 30 grand to go and buy a car? It doesn't matter if it's a £5,000 car, a £10,000 car. Of course, if it's only a few £100s, a very different story. It's only a few £100, right? But if it's a £5,000 or £10,000 car, you should still finance it. Because again, think about it. The cost of finance, whatever that may be, let's say it is 5, 6, 7, 8%. Let's say it's 10%, it doesn't matter what that is. Now, the reality is, if you go to, moneysupermarket.com or Compare the Market, or, these types of places online, they're going to give you traditional car finance companies. If you go to Experian with your credit file and you look for car finance and it throws up a few bunch of different car finance companies, those are car finance companies that are offering products where they get their finance and funding from the high street banks. The high street banks are governed by the Bank of England base rate in terms of interest rates and all of that stuff, which means you're going to probably pay a higher interest rate. But if you can get a car finance broker, which anyone can do, it's just not looking at the banks, it's not looking at your Experian credit report and what they're suggesting, it's not looking at these, money supermarket and all this kind of comparison sites online. It's actually getting in touch with car finance brokers that specialize in that. They go to the whole of the market. They look at these different finance companies that are not in a line with the Bank of England base rate and can get you better car finance rates. All of my cars, as well as the cars that I'm purchasing soon, are all under 4%. And it's not like I'm someone that's special or not. It's just I've used a car finance broker who can go and negotiate the best rates on behalf of the client. Now, if you don't have great credit, of course the cost of finance is going to be a lot more. But let's say it's like 10%, right? That's an expensive cost of borrowing. But here's the point. If you are financing a car and it's costing you 10% in the finance, the trade-off there is that £30,000, and the example I gave is putting down a 10% deposit for a car. So if you're buying a 30 grand car, you're only putting down a £3,000 deposit. It means that you keep that £27,000. And of course, the cost of finance, even if it's expensive at 10%, it's a cost there. But you can take that 27,000 and go and invest that. And again, the example I used in that video was to invest in property. You could go and buy a £100,000 property, use 25 grand of that 27, which is 25% deposit on a rental property, a buy-to-let. And then, of course, you've got some other purchasing costs and everything else. Let's not get into the finer details and numbers. The reality is you probably need more than 27,000, but you can also get buy-to-let mortgages where you only put down a 20% deposit, which would be 20 grand, which means the other 7,000 is more than enough to cover the additional cost to buy a property. And this was on an assumption of buying a property that needed no renovation done, like a working condition property. And of course, what I teach with a lot of my students that come on in my property education programs is to buy at discount, is to add value for a refurb and refinance. It's to do creative financing through different financing strategies. But let's keep this super simple just now. So if you use that money to invest in a property, the idea here is the property will be producing an income. Because a property has some monthly expenses. It has the mortgage interest payment. It has the letting agent's management fee. It also has the building insurance. Then anything left over is profit. That's your income from that property that will come in month after month by renting it out. And then off the back of that, that income could be more than enough to pay the cost of finance for that car. And if it's more than enough, then great. Here's the difference. If you've got that car and that car you're driving and putting 10,000 miles on it over, let's say, 3 years, then you've put on 30,000 miles on that car that you've bought for 30 grand cash. In this example, it could be a 10 grand car. It doesn't matter. That car's not going to be worth that same price if you put on 30,000 miles after 3 years. It's just not going to happen. That car's going to go down in value. The difference is if you've invested that money in a property, is that you're going to be generating at least about £4,500 plus net income after the monthly expenses have been paid every year. So let's just round that down to 4,000. Let's make it worse than it actually will be at 4,000. That means over those 3 years, you've received £12,000 income, 12 grand, 4 grand a year from the rent that you're going to be collecting from that tenant. That's after monthly expenses. And that property has likely have gone up in value from, let's say it's a 100k property, it's probably gone up to about 110, 115,000. Could be more. It could be less. And let's say it's less than 100 grand because whatever property prices have gone down. It doesn't matter because property over the long term will go back up in value. That car is not going to go back up in value. It's going to continue to depreciate. So there's no comparison between cars and property. You just can't even have that argument with me or anyone, as a matter of fact. So the difference is that cost of the finance or whatever it is, you're putting that money into an asset that will go up in value. I mean, property prices normally double every 12 to 15 years, normally. But let's say it only goes up by 50% in 12 years. That property you bought today for 100k is now worth 150,000. It's going to be worth way more, but let's just say it's only worth 150,000. That car is not going to be worth that. That car's probably been thrown at the scrapyard in 10 years. This is how you just cannot compare. And then if we get into the weeds, because a lot of the comments were just hilarious comments like, you can't get a property that's got that much rent and can give you that net income for 100 grand. And people were talking about, you know, not in my area and not in this area. Well, again, like I live nowhere near my investment area. I live over an hour away from where I own the majority of my properties. So you don't have to live and buy property on your doorstep. That's why you use a letting agent to manage your property portfolio. That's why that letting agent can make sure they get the right tenants in place, do all the referencing checks, put the right insurance in place, because a few people were panicking about, what if tenants trash the property? Hey, look, that's happened to me. I've got a big property portfolio, it happens, but there's insurances in place to make sure that it's not going to be coming out of my pocket. Then people were talking about, what about tenants paying the rent? That's why for me, almost 100% of my tenants are housing benefit tenants, which means that they're getting paid by the government. They're getting paid housing benefit money to cover their rent. So there's no risk to not getting paid. It's getting paid already on their behalf. So there's nothing but upside. And let's say it's a car that's not 30 grand, it's a car for 5 grand or 10 grand, and people say, well, you know, it's only a 5 or 10 grand, I don't have 30 grand, get in with the real world, who can all go and buy a cash 30 grand? Even if it was a 5 or 10 grand, let's scale it back. You wouldn't be using that money to go and invest in property, but I tell you what you could invest that in. Invest it in your own education, because there'll never be a better investment that you make than the investment that you make in yourself to acquire a new skill set, a new knowledge, new information that you can go and apply. And maybe that's something that you can apply within the workplace for the organization that you might work with to be more valuable to get further promotions. That's one way of being proactive to make more money. Or it could be a little bit of a side hustle that you're learning about sales or learning about marketing or learning about whatever e-com it might be, you know, whatever it may be, a new skill set, you can do a little bit of a side hustle to make some money in the evenings or the weekend or whatever that may be. The whole point is that if you're investing in your education and knowledge to learn that skill set and you're going to apply it, you'll make more money. A greater return than you would have if you put that money in a car. And the same goes with building up assets that are continuing to go up in value and produce an income to allow you to pay for all your liabilities like your cars. And one of the comments was hilarious. So-called millionaire buying his cars with finance. Well, maybe there's a clue there why, why I'm in this situation. Now, here's the crazy thing. Because of the cost of finance, like, most of my cars are financed under 4%. Again, some people in the comments were saying things like, yeah, you can't get that finance for that. Again, that's because you're looking at the high street banks or the things that I already spoke about. You need to look for a finance broker that can get you those better rates. And once I get those better, I'm like, okay, like if I took, let's say I got my Lamborghini Urus, right? 285,000 to buy that car. Now, if I bought that cash, it could have been a 20 grand car, it doesn't matter. But 285,000, if I put all that money cash into that car, then that's money that's getting put into a depreciating asset. It's a liability in terms of it's going to cost me money, and it's going to go down in value because they're putting miles on it. It's just what's going to happen, you know, and all the costs that come with it. That's working capital that's tied up in a car. But I've got my finance on that at 3.8%. So what does that mean? As long as I can then take that, and I only had to put down a 10% deposit, which means that I only had to put down, 28,000, 28,500, and the cost of finance in there. But then I still have like the 250,000 plus of working capital to go and invest. I can go and put that into property deals, I can put it into another business, I can put it into whatever that's going to produce a higher interest rate than 3.8% the cost of finance. And this is what you need to be thinking about. It's not getting caught up in the cost of finance. If the cost of finance is 3.8, 5, 7, 10%, whatever it is, you've got to ask yourself, can I use that money to get a greater return than what the cost of car finance is? And if the answer is yes, you always finance. I don't see any logical reason other than it's a cheap car that's under a couple of £1,000 to buy a car cash. And there's some people in there going, well, I don't need a flash car, I don't need this. And I get that, look, you don't need to have flash cars, but let's get fucking real, right? Let's just be honest. Let's just be honest. You try to tell me that when you're in your whatever car that you're in just now and you pull up at the lights and you see other cars driving past you, are you trying to tell me that you're not sitting there wishing you were sitting in one of those other cars. You try to tell me that you're doing this because it's a choice and it's getting you from, this is the best one, it gets you from A to B. You know, I don't need another car, it's just the same thing, I'm just driving. Look, you can come up with every excuses you want, but until you get in a nice car, right? A nice Mercedes, a nice BMW, a nice, whatever it is, like think about it, think a Ferrari, a Lamborghini, you know, a Bentley, a Range Rover, a Rolls Royce, whatever it may be. Like go and test drive some of those cars, right? Like go and do a knockhill racing circuit day and race a Ferrari. I'll guarantee you do that kind of stuff, walk around the forecourt in a car garage and you see those cars, trust me, you'll be motivated to want to have those cars. It doesn't matter if you're going to go from A to B. You may as well do it in a bit of luxury where you can enjoy it and feel good and everything else, because it's a big difference. There's a big difference, right? Trust me, this is coming from someone whose first car was a Ford Fiesta, bought cash, for 500 quid, M-Reg, right? My second car after that was a Ford Orion. Then after that, I had the Vauxhall Astra. And then after that, I had a Peugeot Partner. And after Peugeot Partner, I had a Peugeot 206. And after Peugeot 206, what did I then have? We also had a Vauxhall Tigra as well, which is a soft top, or a hard top, I should say. So I've had a bunch of different cars, gradually starting to grow up until I then get the Audis, the Range Rovers, the BMs, and then, you know, nowadays Bentleys, you know, Lamborghinis and all that kind of stuff. But you build up to that. So I get it, I'm with you. And every one of my cars, by the way, my BMW M3, I bought that cash. And that was a stupid thing for me to do. I was coming into a lot of money, I was in my mid-20s, bought it cash, because I never understood this stuff. What I'm talking to you guys about back then, that was not good use of money. I could have got that at a very cheap cost of finance and utilised that money to build my wealth even quicker. So this is just something that you should be mindful of and consider and start thinking about doing things a little bit differently with your money, because it's all about your leverage. The cost of finance, can I go and leverage that money to get a greater return than the cost of finance? And if so, you should always finance the cars. Finance whatever you can do. And some of the comments there, maybe you should jump over my TikTok and look at the comments in there. The comments are hilarious. And it's one of those ones where I love the interaction, I love the engagement. I'll try and respond to as many questions as possible. If you guys have got comments as well off the things that I'm talking about just now, maybe you've got a different perspective or whatever that may be, then drop it in the comments box. I'll take the time to go in and respond. And on that note, it's crazy that over 80% of all my subscribers have not yet been, you know, subscribe to my channel, that they're not actually, they're watching my content. Maybe you're watching this, but you've not yet subscribed. So please do me a favor, get yourself subscribed, hit that notification bell as well to be notified when I drop more content, because the more that I can help you guys with things like this in terms of how to learn more about money, learn more about investment, more about business, more about personal growth, then it gives me more motivation that you guys are enjoying this content. So drop some comments, make sure you're subscribed, and I'll catch you guys soon.